everyone, to another episode of Digitally Discarded. Today, I'm talking with author Caroline Nadine Helsing, who has written a beautiful and touching story, maybe more of a love note about her mother, her family, and the bonds that grew out of this journey. Caroline, thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. And I got to say, I really enjoyed reading the story.
Oh, I'm so glad.
It was a really pleasant surprise.
Thank you.
But one thing is your mom lived many lives and tried to certainly grab the most out of them and teaching you along the way. Your mom, Lee, or Lisa, as she was known later in life, grew up in a time when it was very challenging for a young woman. Can you give us a little taste of what your mom's life was like?
Yeah. So I feel like she was, she was born first during the Great Depression. But I have to say she lived her life, kind of in a fantasy world, if you will. And I don't know, some things had happened to her. She lost her father, some traumatic things. But I think for her, in order to deal with that from a very young age, she kind of escaped into this fantasy world, if you will, of movie stars and glamour and all of that. And so in an era where, maybe the Leave It to Beaver or, Doris Day type perfect housewife was the norm, she definitely bucked that system. She was not your typical housewife during the 60s, 50s, any of that. She was definitely her own woman.
Which I guess is how you came to the title of the book, Unapologetic.
Yes. Yeah, she lived her life unapologetically herself at all times, whether good or bad. But yeah. And when I say, she taught me things, she, was, she wasn't the person that would, she didn't teach me how to cook or, make the perfect, hospital bed corner, the clean, any of that. She was very much someone who taught by just doing. And, I learned by observing. And through her, I learned to just be confident myself, to follow my bliss. She always did that. So I admire her a lot for that.
She was the master of life lessons.
Yeah.
Which is, again, I think I grew up in a home with a single mom and who worked, which again was probably similar age to your mom. And it was very unusual. And the social network, I grew up in a small town, wasn't there because, she wasn't part of a couple. And a single woman was sometimes threatening to a group. But, she still kind of forged her way, as you say, and I felt it reading the book very unapologetically. And she was just going to continue to be curious and learn. And I mean, it was inspiring story, although I wonder, as a child, how was it for you?
Well, as a child, I think you want your family members to be like, everyone else. You want your mother to be like your friend's mother, or, and there's a part of you that recognizes that, she's different. And I think as you get older, you definitely appreciate that so much more. So yeah, it's not like she went to the PTA or baked those cookies or any of that. But she was a lot of fun to be around. And I mean, she's such a beautiful, sweet person. I mean, people gravitated toward her. And I was definitely, my brother and I were definitely her shadows. She took us everywhere. So she was very hands-on in that way. By just, always having us with her.
Well, I have to say, and again, you're going to have to read the book to kind of find out more about the people that she was hanging out with. But there are some big names, and I would have loved to have attended some of those parties. And
a fly on the wall, I always say. Yeah.
Absolutely, or an olive in the martini.
Yeah.
Um, you know, and I was thinking about this and reading the book, and again, reading a book these days is kind of old school, I guess. But you know, social media back in the day, there was social media, but it was in the form of tabloids and magazines with, you know, kind of the odd, you know, variety show, I guess.
Mhm.
And I guess I was thinking about how that world would actually play out in the world today, and wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah. So, speaking about celebrities in that era versus now, or technology in that era versus now, I think a lot of, celebrities in that era were, they had a narrative dictated by the movie studios for them. Um, and I think now, celebrities, people, influencers, whatever you want to call, people in the public eye have a lot more autonomy and can use their platform in a way to further their own, say if they're interested in certain social causes or whatnot, and they have a lot more control, I think, if you will. Um, and with regards to technology in that era, I can talk about now. Everything seems to be a lot quicker, a lot easier, a lot faster. If somebody spots somebody, they can instantly take a picture with their iPhone or a video with their iPhone and upload it immediately to whatever, wherever, social media, for example. Then, is a lot more of a process, a slower, there was a select few who were either invited or knew about an event. Let's say, for example, that, they had a camera and they took the pictures, they they developed it in a dark room, and and then they sent a hard copy to the publishing house. So there's a difference in that aspect there. But you're right. I mean, there's still media. There was still media, and it just came in the form of tabloids or you know
And
versus
I think
internet.
your mom worked alongside, I think, the
Yeah.
person who was, I think, probably the leader of all of this.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely. Well, it's funny that you say worked. Yeah, she was friends with Ron Galella, who was the original paparazzi, honestly, and they were like the Bonnie and Clyde of crashing parties together. I like to think he would find out about these movie premieres in New York City, and she would go with with him, and hide his camera under the table while then sit next to Frank Sinatra. And, I mean, she was at the parties with Ava Gardner and Charlie Chaplin and all these people. And she just walked in like she owned the place, and I think they kind of she definitely helped him get in. And then he would do his own thing and, then sell his pictures to the tabloids after. And he became very well known later. Yeah, quite later. And Andy Warhol said that he was his favorite photographer. So he was, yeah, his photographs are everywhere now. He's the one that made Jackie Kennedy, that photo of her walking across the street, the black and white shot with her wearing the striped t-shirt and her hair in her face. He made that picture famous. But he was also a thorn in a lot of celebs, side. Like he got his teeth punched out by Brando, and he wasn't necessarily liked because he was incessant with his search of these celebrities. But that was his life. Yeah, he was.
And your mom was kind of a part of it. She had a front row seat to a lot of this.
Yeah, she did. In fact, she was written up in the New York Post. I think the article went something like, "We have a new party crasher on the scene." They call her Harlow, and she gets in merely by outdressing the other female guests or something, crazy cute like that. But yeah, she was She was definitely beautiful and confident, and yeah.
And I mean, how would you hear of these stories? Would she tell them to you? Did you find a lot of it in your research?
Yeah. So growing up, I had heard these stories, and it's interesting that you say that because after she had passed, in cleaning up her things, I came across, a lot of the, it's like almost like proof. When you have stories, it's very wispy, but then when you find the actual tangible, let's say, programs, like we can talk about the parties that she'd crashed with Ron Galila. I came across the programs and the seating charts where, I mean, everyone who was anyone, Elizabeth Taylor, I mean, everyone was there. And then just to sit and imagine, like, goodness, like, what table did she sit next to or sit at, and who did she sit next to? And it just was like, it just became more real. So I had the stories, and then I had sort of the tangible aspects that helped me to confirm that it was all true.
And when she was, going, I don't know if this is an appropriate question, but I am curious. When during this period, how old was she?
She was, she was in her 20s, I believe, late teens or early 20s. Yeah, young.
Young, yeah, like yesterday. Well, I certainly wasn't doing that in my teens, but she grew up in New York City, and then the family moved to Hawaii, another like exotic island.
Yeah, so my parents met in New York City, and then I say they migrated west. So they moved out to Arizona, where my brother was born, and then my father accepted a position in Hawaii that he thought would just, last, I don't know, a year or two. It'll be fun. They're newlyweds, and it turned out they were there for about 36 or 7 years. So that's where I was born.
So you're a native Hawaiian.
I am, yes, a native of Hawaii.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I have to say, I'm sure in writing the book, it was cathartic in many ways.
It was.
Not all of us have, I think, the privilege of writing an interesting story about their moms, although I got to think that, and just through this podcast, I know everyone has an interesting story. But I will say again that if you are looking for a great summer read, really do go buy Unapologetic on Amazon. And if you want to find out more about Caroline and her world and her mom's world and growing up, you can visit her website at www.carolinenadinehelsing.com, or just Google Caroline Nadine Helsing author, and you're going to get all this really interesting information. And just wish you were there to see some of the outfits. And a shout out.
I post there's I have some social pages, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And on Instagram, especially Instagram and Facebook, I like to try and post something once a day, and I'll post pictures of my mother or the rest of the family. So you'll see pictures of her then and now, and excerpts from the book and videos sometimes. So kind of an accompaniment to the book as you read it.
Well, I love New York because of, the kind of world that your mom lived in. And when I was a little girl, I would kind of dream about that I wanted to live someday. And here I am. And at least I'm talking to someone who can tell me firsthand or secondhand about that life. So really, thank you so much for taking the time. And, I really enjoyed reading the book and meeting you, because it was a really wonderful story.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome. And take care and have a good summer.
Thank you, you too.